Tarpley, welcome to the program. We're hearing a new word now when it comes to the elections in the United States, and that's duopoly, when they're speaking about the Democrats and the Republicans working as one and preventing a third party from taking part in the elections, or preventing, they say, the election system to be changed. Now, what can you tell us about that?
Well, I think the one thing we can hope for today, whoever wins or loses, is a continuation of divided government. If Romney prevails, probably through vote fraud, and I mean election fraud organized through computers and machines that was just mentioned, it's also likely that Romney would come in with Republican control of the Senate and the House. And in that case, it wouldn't just be the exclusion of third parties. It would be a permanent austerity dictatorship, a permanent plutocratic regime. If you had the Republicans controlling the presidency, the House, and the Senate, they could then pack the Supreme Court with reactionaries and proto-fascists, and then they could restrict the franchise, which is what they're doing now. They're making it harder and harder for people to vote. If you're black, if you're Hispanic, if you're old or young or poor, the Republicans don't want you to vote. And that could then become this 40-year Reich that Karl Rove has talked about, where the Republicans run everything. And I think that the center of it is that Tag Romney and his friends seem to have gotten control over the voting machines in about 15 states. This election is much more like 2004, evenly matched. That was Bush-Kerry in 2004. Vote fraud in Ohio, top-down vote fraud, was what made the difference. And I think we're back to that now. It's very interesting that our left liberal heroes, right, the people who supposedly represent progressive thought, people like Michael Moore, Rachel Maddow, Noam Chomsky, they will never talk about vote fraud of this type, because that, of course, would be a conspiracy theory, and they don't want to do that. But it seems to me that's what it is. I would just add to the sources that were mentioned, the free press. Bob Fitrakis in Ohio has written a book about 2004, and he's been warning about what's going to happen this year. So take a look at Bob Fitrakis, the editor of the Free Press, and you'll see what is quite possibly going to happen. And I wrote a book warning against Romney. Romney would be the first non-Christian president of the United States. He is a Mormon. Mormons of this type that he represents believe that they're above the law. So there's another reason why vote fraud is certainly within their reach.
Would you say that Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, when it comes to these two specific candidates, what would be different between them when it comes to foreign and domestic policies? We have some people saying that actually things are not going to change that much in terms of even domestic policy. What do you say about that?
I think the danger with Romney is this consolidation of a permanent dictatorship. Once again, if Romney comes in, especially with vote fraud, he'll have the Senate, he'll have the House, he will then control the Supreme Court, they can pack it, and then they will proceed to make it harder and harder for people to vote. And it won't be any way to do anything about that. Citizens United has already enshrined money as the key variable in these races, although it's not as effective as they had hoped. And that would then give us, you know, a long period of austerity dictatorship, probably then with increasingly aggressive foreign policy, because we know the neocons would be running the foreign policy, right? Romney is surrounded by neocons. It's harder to organize a permanent austerity dictatorship with the Democratic Party. If Obama wins, he's going to turn around and betray and attack his own base in the so-called lame duck session with this demagogy, this big lie of a fiscal cliff and a grand bargain. And the grand bargain, of course, is token cuts against the super rich that barely affect their luxuries. And, however, cuts in the social services that will cut into the necessities of the poor.
Yeah, so we don't run out of time. Caleb Maupin, would you agree with the statements there that when it comes to foreign domestic policy, these two differ, especially when it comes to the issues of war? We have in Afghanistan, Iraq, the threats of war against Iran, the situation in Syria, threats of even military action. There we've been hearing a lot of concerns. What's your view?
I think the difference isn't in action, it's in tone. I think if Barack Obama is reelected, we will continue to see the same actions. However, you know, it will be done with a tone of pretending to be concerned about peace and people's concerns while carrying out war. But if Romney gets in, it will be done in a tone of, you know, militaristic jingoism and, you know, the same thing we saw with Bush. The policies are the same. You know, the fiscal cliff, they're talking about that. After this election's over, they're going to announce that the party's over and they're going to start going after all the social programs in the United States. And they're also going to start stepping up the push for intervention in Syria. And that's whether it's Obama or Romney. Just the question is, what tone of voice are they going to use while they do it? Are they going to be riling up the population into a war drive? Are they going to be saying, oh, this is just something we have to do, you know, humanitarian intervention? It's just, it's what words they use while they carry out the policies. That's
Mark
the difference.
Mark Dankoff, your view on this as well. Now, a lot of people would say that the decisions that are made by either a Republican president or a Democrat president is inevitably influenced by the groups that supported them during their campaigns. That includes the corporations, that includes the Israeli lobbies. So basically, how independent do you think these parties are when it comes to these decision makings, and do they differ? Because we even saw the same corporations, for instance, in this campaign giving equal funds to both candidates.
Well, that's exactly right, and I agree with basically what Webster has said and most of what the other guest has said about this. I'm the ultimate cynic in regard to this whole business. When you look at how these elections are being funded with reference to the Citizens United decision, when you look at who owns corporate media, when you look at the PAC money and the 501c4 money, when you look at all of the various things that are involved in what has transpired here, including the voting machine fraud, my own view is a mixture of Joseph Stalin and Ezra Pound, the American poet. Joseph Stalin said that it's the identity of the people voting is less important than the identity of the people counting the votes. And Ezra Pound, the American poet, took it a step further and said that in a mass participatory democracy, Jews count the votes. And when you look at banking, when you look at the Israeli lobby and all of the usual suspects in this situation, I would be less than candid if I didn't say that in terms of the international banking system and the multinational corporations, the Israeli lobby and the corporate media controlled by Jewish interests in the United States, that the synthesis of the views of Stalin and Ezra Pound is probably pretty close to the truth.
Right, we're quickly running out of time. I'd just like to get some comments again on the main topic of this program, and that is what kind of changes the election system in the United States wants, if it indeed wants those changes. Now, Mr. Tarpley, before thinking about the need for anything radical, some analysts were saying it would help just to abolish the electoral college system, to create more public funding and financing of elections, and rather to make the debates more impartial. Now, do you think these are changes that are going to help, or is something more radical needed?
No, I think those are not the changes we should think about right now. Those are all process reforms. Things have gone much farther than that for American working people. American working people need help to stay in their homes, to find a job, to get medical care, not to be foreclosed on, to get some food stamps and so forth. These other changes have basically no effect on the everyday life of the average person. They have no mass traction. You've got to build a movement with mass traction demands. Just this past Saturday in New York, such a movement was launched. It's called the United Front Against Austerity, and it calls for things like a student loan amnesty. The kids are being crushed under $1 trillion of student loans. Let's have an amnesty. Let's cancel that debt and free up the younger generation so that they can get on with their lives. Let's just stop all foreclosures. Let's have open-ended unemployment benefits. Let's increase the funding for food stamps instead of what's being done. American working people are up against it, and they don't have time for these good government reforms.
Thank you very much, Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley, author and historian, with us there live from Washington. I'd also like to thank our guest in New York, Caleb Borpin with the International Action Center, and from San Antonio, Mark Dankoff, former U.S. Senate candidate. Thank you very much for staying with another edition of News Analysis. From me, Homa Lesgi, it's goodbye.